thank you. And truly thank you. The people who make our world more beautiful, more interesting, more fun. I am so grateful. Every time I pick up anything, somebody designed it. Somebody thought about it. So thank you. And I'm going to give you the biggest design challenge of your life, because we're in trouble. Humanity is on the edge. Or if we're not on the edge, we're on a bus headed for it at warp speed. And we're looking around, enjoying the view out the window, and the bus is headed for the cliff. And most people in the world live on the edge. Half the world's people have, what, $250 a day to live on? At the same time that 85 people, most of them in the United States, have half the world's wealth. It's owned by 1%. So we talk about redesigning commerce, and are we lending too much? Are we borrowing too much? Has the whole world gone mad? Whole? We're losing the world. We're losing life. We're losing the capacity of the planet to sustain life. Losing species at a greater rate than when the dinosaurs went extinct. Losing whole ecosystems, coral reefs, sorry scuba divers, business as usual. There will probably be no living coral reefs on planet Earth, perhaps as early as 2030, 2035. The Amazon is dying because of climate change. And the oceans are acidifying. Now, yeah, we can probably live without oysters, but we cannot live without the oxygen produced by the little phytoplankton. An acid ocean eats their calciferous shells. And John Fullerton said this. Johan Rockström and his incredible gang of scientists showed that we're beyond the planetary boundaries. Dr. Kate Raworth showed that we're not even yet meeting the basic human minimums to ensure a life of dignity for all people. And we're not even running a very good economy. In the Great Crash, $50 trillion, 80 million jobs evaporated. And what, we heard yesterday, a third of all the design jobs gone. And the experts don't know what's going on. This piece in the Financial Times, one of the central bankers of the European Central Bank, said, we don't fully understand what's happening to advanced economies. Oh, charming, if you boys don't know, who should? The great designer said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. This has been done. The economy that we are living with was built for purpose by 36 men who gathered in 1947 in a hotel called Mont Pelerin outside Montreux, Switzerland, and set out to build the intellectual architecture that now runs the world. Ludwig von Mises, who was reacting to National Socialism, remember World War II had just ruined Europe. Friedrich Hayek, who was reacting to Soviet communalism, collectivism, and Milton Friedman, who believed in the primacy of the liberty of the individual. And they built this seed crystal of an intellectual architecture. They got 3 of their members as heads of state, 9 Nobel laureates in economics. Nathan was railing about the Chicago School. These guys are the ones who built the Chicago School of Economics that now runs economics departments in essentially every university around the world. And in 1980, with the rise to power in the UK of Margaret Thatcher and in the United States of Ronald Reagan, they won. This is Friedrich Hayek advising Reagan. And this mental model is in all of our heads. We believe this is the way that you ought to run an economy. And so we hear daily, debt, we can't possibly go into debt. We're saddling our children with this future debt, when in fact the US government can now borrow money at negative interest rate. Austerity. Austerity is sweeping the world. We can't possibly pay to take care of people or take care of the environment. We have to have austerity. So the world's banker has been ruining the economies of Greece, of Italy, of Spain, and now her own. And at the same time, here's the life that we are told we should live. Get dressed in clothes that we buy for work, drive through traffic in a car that we're paying for in order to get to the job that you need to pay for the clothes in the car and the house you're leaving vacant because you've just driven to work to make the money to pay for it all. Is this the world that we set out to design? And we're not even happy about it. We've optimized, okay, if we want to optimize, we've optimized on growing GDP, gross domestic product, gross national product. And we're steadily less happy. I like this New Yorker cartoon. What would you suggest to fill the dark, empty spaces in my soul? You know, kudos to Adam and his crew at Yertle who are trying to turn this around. Mandela said it. Poverty is not an accident. We built it. And so we can unbuild it. Pete Seeger, the gentlefolk singer who lived up the Hudson, said the key to the future of the world is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. And we've heard a lot in the last couple of days about story. Yeah, I gave John Fullerton the book Winning the Story Wars. And if you haven't read it, there's your homework. The subtitle is Why Those Who Tell and Live the Best Stories Will Rule the Future. And we have one hell of a story. Dr. Mark Jacobson at Stanford has shown that we can power the world with renewable energy. There are no technological challenges to doing this. We have all the technologies we need to solve every problem facing humanity. Citigroup this June came out with a report, Energy Darwinism. They said this is the era of renewables. Alarming fall in the cost of solar. Alarming to who? What was interesting was they said, yeah, there is now utility scale solar on offer at 5 cents a kilowatt hour, but we discount that because it's subsidized. Note to city, all energy is subsidized, and the fossil energy gets subsidized 12 times the amount of all efficiency in renewables. But never mind. What they said that was interesting is 10-year unsubsidized forward price of gas, which they said was the cheapest technological option, 11 cents a kilowatt hour. 10-year unsubsidized forward price of solar, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. They said it's over solar winds. We can do this. Communities are doing it. The Isle of Egg off the coast of Scotland had been owned by some land barons. They were going to sell it for a golf course. The people said no, and they crowdsourced to raise enough money to buy their island back, to buy their home, and they're now taking it 100% renewably powered. It's the only place in Scotland with net in-migration. Bavaria, cold, cloudy Germany. California gets 70% more sun than cold, cloudy Germany. Germany, year on year, has been installing at least 20 times the amount of solar that's been going in California. Bavaria has more solar than the entire United States. Have we forgotten how to America? The studies are in. Energy efficiency renewables gives you 10 times the jobs of building any central station plant. Occam Steiner, my friend who runs UN Environment Program, has said probably half the jobs in the world will be green jobs by 2030. And there is a business case here. CDP announced on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange a report showing that the S&P 500 companies that bake in sustainability are financially outperforming those that don't. 18% higher return on equity, 67% higher return on equity than companies that don't even report. There are now more than 50 studies showing that these sustainability leaders are financially outperforming the laggards. And it's what people want. A month ago, a block from here, 400,000 people in the streets. How many of you were there? Wasn't it amazing? And there is nothing politicians fear more than people in the streets. Because when institutions lose legitimacy, they die quickly. I like the little guy at the bottom who's walking away. And I spent time with the Occupy folk. Now, this was an interesting phenomenon, and they changed the conversation, but what they lacked was a theory of change. And what they were calling for was fairly dark. How many of you have watched this video? #1 most watched video on YouTube for all of 2013. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. Russell Brand saying, "I haven't a flicker of a doubt, there will be revolution." Really? Is this what we want? Is this our story? I would suggest it's a bad one. Sarah Palin shoots straighter than most of you. What we lack is, first of all, a theory of change. How does change happen? And then a strategy of change. About 2 years ago, I was asked by the King of Bhutan and the Prime Minister of Bhutan, who came up to me and said, "Hunter, your job is to reinvent the global economy." It's like, me? But I set about trying and asking the brightest people I could find. Asked a guy named Rick Stuckey, who's known on Wall Street as Fix-It Rick. He's the guy Citibank called in to deal with their toxic assets. And he said, "Yeah, I'll help, but who you really want is John Fullerton." So I'm glad you guys had a chance today to hear from John. I do think what he's working on with this regenerative economy is where it is that we're heading to. Dr. Robert Costanza, John had this cute slide where it flipped. That basic concept of economy in society and nature is Bob's. Dr. Jacqueline McGlade, Chief Scientist of UN Environment. Dr. Ida Kubashevsky. Richard and Kate Wilkinson. John showed their graph of what inequality does. Ashok Khosla runs development alternatives in India. We now have a team of about 100 of us from around the world who are coming together to build a new narrative, a new story. It's called the Alliance for Sustainability and Prosperity. I would invite you all to join us. We're going to need a lot of help. This is not an exercise that's going to be done in a room by a few of us. What we're going to do is try to put together a seed crystal based on the work of people who've been doing this for a long time, which we then take out to everyone. And we're going to need to tell it as a story with all of the best design help we can get. Adam Werbach and I both used to work for a man named David Brower, founder of Friends of the Earth, Earth Island Institute, our generation's John Muir or Thoreau. Dave said when you're standing at the edge of a cliff, the only smart thing to do is take a step back and turn around. He called for the great ecological U-turn. And when you turn, you can see all that we've left behind, the intactness of nature, of indigenous wisdom, of the people who've been living at the edges, the heretics, the artists, the people who've been left out of the conversation. These are the ones that we need to bring into the conversation to create a new story, a story that gives all of us a place to stand, something to hang on to. And I think we need to start celebrating this edge that we're living on. Janine Benyus teaches us that where two ecosystems come together, that's where you get abundance because it's where you have diversity. Entrepreneurs have always launched from edges to go and find a new world. And when they do, they find it's not a flat earth. You don't fall off the edge. It's a round earth. And this whole notion of the circular economy, Walter Stahel's cradle-to-cradle concept. We're an interesting species, aren't we? We create things, and then we forget we created them. We go, oh, we can't change that. That's just the way it is. Everything that doesn't work about the economy today was created growing out of the work of these 36 men, and we can change it. Who's responsible? This was the winner of the Not My Job Award. The great oceanographer Sylvia Earle says what we do in the next 10 years matters more than what humanity does in the next 10,000. And so as Nathan mentioned, I go around creating new schools. I've just created another one, helping to create it. The BARD graduate programs in sustainability. We have an MBA in sustainability. We have masters in climate science and policy. If any of you in New York area are looking to have the kind of program that Nathan had, come play with us, come talk to me. If you're from the West Coast, go talk to Nathan. I lecture at Nathan's program every year. It's a great program. But here's the design challenge, and I need the help of every one of you. Bucky said it. Make the world work for 100% of humanity as quickly as we can through cooperation without making the situation worse. You in? Thank you.
Have a seat. Tweet your questions. This is your last chance, actually, to do so. I wanted to start out by saying I really appreciate how hopeful you are and how aspirational and positive. Like, you didn't talk about everything that's bad. You didn't talk, like, we all know that, right? We all know we're in trouble. You talked about, well, we're already there with technology. We're already there with energy. We already have a lot of this solved. We just need to put it into place. So my first question is, what do we all do tomorrow, or maybe Monday? Well, tomorrow, tonight, we'll have fun. But what do we do Monday when we get back to our jobs? Where do we focus our energy first?
Do one thing. Pick one. Look around you. What's in your life where you know you can make a difference? And sometimes it truly is as simple as smiling at the homeless person that's sitting on the street. Just be kind. But then begin to think about what made them homeless. What is the larger system? Eisenhower used to say when he had a problem he couldn't deal with, he made it bigger. So for every problem that's in front of you, what is the system that it's a part of, and what is the design answer? You guys have this incredible, unique talent of seeing holes, of seeing things in systems, of seeing things through art, through beauty. Use that talent. And then look around you and think, what can I do to make a difference? In every building you live in, there are energy efficiency improvements that can be made. In the food you buy, Douglas told these marvelous stories of what's being done around food. John Fullerton mentioned Alan Savory. I'll be with Alan and his team in a week or so after I get back from China. What Alan is doing is a huge design initiative of using grazing animals the way that grazing animals and grasslands co-evolved. Dense packed by predators, fertilizing the soil, taking carbon out of the air through the grass and putting it back in the soil. And when you do that, the ranchers make more money. The whole system works. If we can spread this kind of technology around, we can change all of agriculture. What can you do? Find and buy locally grown grass beef. Find holistic management practitioners and buy from them. And if you want to buy less meat, you'll pay a little bit more, so buy a little bit less than you have been now from the confined animal feeding operations that are decarbonizing the soil, releasing methane, and doing it wrong. With everything you do, every dollar you spend, you're voting. Oh, and one more thing, go vote!
Yeah.
Not voting is not rebellion, it is surrender. Yeah. Get the fuck out and vote.
Yeah. And it always matters.
And it always matters. Your vote does count. And take somebody with you. Take 5 people with you. And that really will matter.
Nice. Well, and so I hear you saying, at the very least, we can change little things about our behavior, and that adds up. But also from a professional standpoint, even if we don't feel like we have a story personally, that we have an answer, there are people around us, we could just point to the people you're pointing to, and they have a story that's ready to be told, and we can help tell that story for them or with them.
Learn to tell stories. Humans have always learned by stories. We don't learn by facts and figures. That's what machines are really good at. Learn to tell stories in a way that captures the heart of the person with whom you're talking. And this can be someone you're standing in a grocery store line with, checkout line. You start talking about why it is you're buying this as opposed to that. Throughout your day, you can become the storyteller of this world that works for 100% of humanity. Now, if any of you have really big ideas about how to reinvent the global economy, I really need them. I still have this feeling of me. I've asked Anders Wigman, one of the co-chairs of the Club of Rome, to run this group. Club of Rome has now taken this initiative on as one of their 3 action pillars, and thereby elected me to the executive committee. It's like, God, I need one more thing to do. But we're going to need the best and the brightest minds, and then bring it on. Have I seen Cowspiracy? No, I don't watch movies. Should I?
Who tweeted that?
Is it any good?
Can you yell out? Nobody wants to
Well,
opt to it now?
if it's on an airplane, I'll try to see it. Graphic work. Do they like cows or not? Yes or no?
Okay.
Sounds like a good film.
That sounds like a good what about, one of the things that I learned at Presidio is that we have all the wrong metrics. We've talked about, how we need to be more human and we shouldn't fear the robots, but we need to put humanity back into the system, into our decisions, into our, we need to optimize for it in our decisions and our goals, but like the GDP is a huge problem because all our metrics are optimized around money and not human. So how do we start changing these things?
There's an article that you can find. It was in Nature. In fact, I think it's on the public section of Nature, written by Dr. Robert Costanza and me and Bob and Kate. Rethinking GDP. There is also a new website on Guardian Sustainable Business, founded by Joe Confino, on rethinking prosperity. So watch that site. Yet we're going to have to reinvent all the metrics. Now there's a very interesting thing going on called the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, which is building metrics for companies to report on whether they are more or less sustainable, and the extent to which their being more or less sustainable is either conveying value to the company or causing cost to the company. And this will change everything about accounting, because what they're doing is saying this is material to a reasonable investor. Somebody looking to put money into a company wants to know, needs to know whether or not a company is behaving more or less sustainably. So this stuff is within, I said to one of the guys, Frank Warner, who teaches up at Fordham, who's working with SASB, I said, well, within 5 years, the SEC will now require SASB reporting. Yes, he said, sooner.
Really?
Really. They're rolling it out a sector a quarter, so
Nice.
Pay attention to SASB. We're going to redefine the metric of GDP. This was why I went to Bhutan. The king of Bhutan, in a throwaway line in 1974, said, we don't care about gross domestic product, we care about gross national happiness. And then he had to say, what does that mean? So he created a whole happiness center in Bhutan, and Bhutan's notion was they were going to lead the world to a new development paradigm based on gross national happiness. Now, Sarkozy, when he was president of France, hired Joe Stiglitz, Amartya Sen, Fitoussi, the French economist, to analyze French national accounts. And they concluded, in effect, you needed a happiness metric to run national accounts well. The World Bank has a project on it, the UN has a project on it, China has a project on it. So in the not distant future, we will reinvent this metric of GDP, but yes, it would be a good idea.
Where are we at? I think a lot of people have probably heard about gross national happiness. Where's it at?
Well, Bhutan's GNH lacked a pillar for economics or business. And 2 weeks before the last election, the government of India pulled the subsidies for cooking oil for Bhutan, thereby doubling the price, and said, if you vote for the prior prime minister, we'll call the debt, thereby crashing Bhutan's economy. And the Bhutanese, lacking any semblance of a backbone, voted for the opposition, and the visionary prime minister was out. I mean, that's democracy, folks. So this opposition party, which up till that point had been a party of, count 'em, 3 people, suddenly went, oh, we get to put a government together. Their prime minister is a Western-educated economist who sees things in the traditional way. So at least for the moment, Bhutan's off the rails. But the group that was pulled together reformed as the Alliance for Sustainability and Prosperity, and we're going on.
Would you agree that if that group had a designer, not that designers are going to change everything, but if they had a designer to refer to and to help, would that move things forward?
Sure. Any of you can go on the ASAP website, look at how it's not a terribly well-designed website, and if you want to help, I'd love to talk to you. We're going to need to tell these stories, not just from ASAP, not just from Bhutan, not just from any of us, but everywhere. So all of you, as you are telling stories, to the extent that you can take what we've been talking about here the last couple of days, different ways of living, human-centered ways, trust-centered ways, sharing economy ways, and just start telling these stories in your designs, you will be part of this solution. Do we need a concentrated Manhattan Project to solve this, or should it be distributed? I'm trying to build the Manhattan Project of it, but when we do, we're going to use the best technology to have a global conversation. Just the way some schools are doing MOOCs, these massive open online classes, 100,000 people in a class, where you pose a question and it gets voted up. We can, I think now, we have the technology to have a global conversation about what is an economy in service to life. I think it's the regenerative economy, but every time John and I, over breakfast this morning, we were talking about, well, he's going to go from 8 elements to 7, and I suggested that he frame it a different way. That's why his paper isn't out yet. It's been 2 years in the making, and it's still not out yet. My feeling is, get it out, rapid prototype, kick it out there, and let people react to it. So that's what we're going to do.
That's a very designerly approach.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Anything to add, Jean?
Well, you know, I keep from the kind of business perspective, it seems to me, to the extent we can channel the kind of existing system to work in our favor, the single most powerful lever, it seems to me, is how do we get a true costing for the cost of externalities? I mean, in some ways we can revise the system, but the way the system is meant to work, if we could just factor into the actual cost what it's really costing the planet, instead of giving organizations a free ride to use resources, that, it seems to me, would naturally drive the set of behaviors that organizations are set up. We'd let them maximize profit, but now profit would reflect the true costs of what that the planet's bearing for this. Is there progress being made on that at all?
Oh, sure. We can count all of these costs, and that's been done and done and done. We know how to do Tobin taxes, tax the bad stuff and subsidize the good stuff. We have all the tools at hand. Why isn't it happening?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think it isn't happening because we lack the narrative of what is the world that we want. What would it look like? What would it taste like, feel like? The counter-narrative is coming out. There was a piece in The Guardian last week called Dark Mountain. And you can go to websites on near-term human extinction in which they say, get together, have a support group, grieve, get over it, and then party on, because it's over. They say humans go extinct by 2050. And they got a lot of science behind them. Now, I asked Kevin Noon, who worked with Rockstrom, who's an eminent scientist, I said, is this stuff true? He said, Yes, it's serious. We are up against it. And as Sylvia said, what we do in the next 10 years will make the difference. But he said, on balance, no, I think there is still time. And we know how to buy time. The principles of natural capitalism, principle 1, use all resources dramatically more efficiently because it buys time. It pushes back the worst of the impacts. Then redesign how we make and deliver everything using approaches like biomimicry or Stahel's circular economy. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation in Europe has shown that doing this in Europe would add trillions of dollars to the GDP. And then third, manage all institutions to be regenerative of human and natural capital, the forms of capital that we've been losing. And I think Fullerton is right. Nature is sustainable because it's regenerative. And learning this concept of what does it mean to be regenerative is the single most important thing that we can all do.
Awesome.
So again, thank you all so much for all it is that you do to make this world wonderful.
Let's thank Hunter.
That was